So what I'm going to do today is attempt to give you a comparison of Unified Service Desk and Omni-channel for customer service. Hopefully my session's quite well timed, because coming up later on we've got Tricia, who's going to do more of a deep dive into Omni-channel. But we've also got Arta and Ashish, who are going to talk about virtual agents and bots. And they're very relevant when we start talking about contact centers and omni-channel and stuff as well, because the virtual kind of side of things is quite important. So hopefully my presentation will end up setting the scene for some of the things that are going to come later on this morning. Let's see how we get on. A little bit about myself, if you don't know who I am. I'm a freelance consultant. I'm a Microsoft MVP and a Microsoft certified trainer. I kind of describe myself as the USD fan. I was a very early adopter of USD, so tended to talk about it quite a lot early on. And I'm also very much an omni-channel fan, and I've done a lot of work with both products. So I'm hoping that puts me in quite a good place to talk to you today about the two different products and talk about the advantages of both of them. It's my blog again. So I blog quite a bit on Unified Service Desk. I'm on Omni-channel. So if you aren't aware of my blog and you're interested in Unified Service Desk, it might be a good place for you to find out loads of information about it. There's quite a lot of content on there, particularly with Unified Service Desk, but more and more I'm putting stuff up there about Omni-channel as well. I've also got, and I'll mention this a little bit more later on, there's a USD accelerator that you can download on my blog, and that kind of helps you get up and running with USD a little bit faster. In fact, the demonstration I'm going to give today is going to be using my accelerator, so hopefully that will kind of position things. And if you want to try anything out that you see today for yourself, then you can download my accelerator and try and give it a go. So to set the scene in terms of the business use case, obviously we're all about contact centers in this space. So contact centers often have unique kind of needs, or the agents within contact centers, specifically around juggling multiple conversations of customers at once, the volume of things you have to cope with, maybe the fact that agents tend to come and go quite a bit in these organizations, and yet they've got some quite complicated business processes to guide customers through. So they need lots of support from the systems to be able to do that in an efficient way. And I do think this is a very topical kind of subject at the moment, because in these times of kind of lockdown and everything going virtual, we're all increasingly reliant on the contact centres that we need to call. So any technology that helps in this space currently is a big win. It's really important stuff to be looking at the moment. So I'm going to start talking about Unified Service Desk, and I will delve into Omni-channel a little bit in a second, but I'm going to leave some more of the detail of that to Tricia later on, who's going to go a deeper dive into Omni-channel. So Unified Service Desk, if you're kind of not familiar with it, it's gives a unified experience, and by that what we mean is the agent's going to get all the different information they need from multiple different sources in one place on one pane of glass. Now, importantly, that's going to involve session management. So session management is of particular importance in certain types of contact center conversations. So imagine, for example, you've got an agent and they're looking after your web chat channel. When you've got somebody who looks after web chat in the contact center, on average, typically they'll deal with 3 to 5 conversations concurrently. And we need to give the customer a kind of impression that they're only talking to them, that we're focused only on that one customer. But the reality is that the agents are dealing with 3 to 5 people concurrently. So what they do is, what you end up doing is you, for each conversation, you've maybe got a web chat open, you've got a case open, maybe a contact record, maybe an account record, maybe the knowledge base is open. So quite quickly you could have, say, 5 browser tabs open for each conversation that you're having. Well, if you're having 5 conversations at once, you've got 25 browser sessions open before you in the blink of an eye. And that can become really quite difficult to navigate. And sessions within Unified Service Desk make that incredibly simple. So it really is kind of a must-have thing for a contact center environment. We've also got agent scripting, and I'll show you a little bit of the concept of agent scripting when we look into the demo. But the idea of agent scripting is to give a guided process to our agents in a very kind of simple way. It's not necessarily a replacement for the business process flows, and they can work in conjunction with. So you still got your business process flows and things happening, say, on the case record, but the agent script may well go across multiple entities, may well be very targeted to the conversations that their agents are having. We've got knowledge base integration, and that's really important in contact center environment, to be able to search the knowledge base to look for potential solutions to customer queries. And particularly with Unified Service Desk, we've got line of business integration. I'll talk a bit more about this in a second, but the integration with potentially legacy back-end systems is often quite important. So it's quite common for a single agent to have to use, say, half a dozen different systems to be able to service the different customers' needs. So I used to work in an insurance company, for example, and all of the interactions with the customers would be logged in Dynamics 365, but the actual things like claims management and working out quotes and anything to do with the policy management and things like that, they'd all be in separate systems. And Unified Service Desk is a way of linking all those disparate systems together. Importantly, Unified Service Desk is a configuration-based framework, so you can create USD applications with kind of no code or low code. It is important, though, that to understand that it's extensible. So if we need a custom hosted control that does something really specific, or maybe this line of business integration's got to be coded, or maybe you've got a particular telephony system we want to integrate in with, all of these things can be done with code over and above the configuration framework. So obviously I've mentioned telephony, so we've got telephony integration. That's obviously at the heart of anything we do in contact centers. But more and more, we're talking about a lot more than just telephony. We're talking about omni-channel sort of situations where we might be having web chat conversations. We might have cases coming in from external portals. Maybe we've got social channels and things. Now, there are a few products out there, like third-party products that work with Unified Service Desk and with Dynamics 365 that give this kind of capability. CafeX's Live Assist for web chat being one of them. And there's a lot of third-party extensions out there we can look at that can then be integrated in with Unified Service Desk, or you could develop things custom yourself if you've got particular needs. Now, importantly, and we'll see this in a minute, Unified Service Desk can also integrate with Omni-channel for customer service. And this gives us some interesting concepts because we're not necessarily talking about it being an either or decision. So when I'm comparing both products, there is kind of a hybrid where you might say, well, we're going to use the best of both worlds. So let's have a look at kind of what Unified Service Desk is. So we've already mentioned it's a configuration-based framework, and I kind of want to get across what that means. And as I start my demo, I'll show you how some of this hangs together, what it kind of looks like. Now, all Unified Service Desk is really is a set of entities, and those entities contain the metadata that define the solution that you've got. So it is purely a set of data, really. Now we have these different entities. So hosted controls are the key entity, if you like. Now the hosted controls are the objects that make up our application. So we might have a tab that shows us accounts, for example. So we'd have an account hosted control. Now off that, we'd have a number of events that could happen. So tabs could load, tabs could close, records could get saved, that kind of thing. And off those events, we could then fire actions. Now the actions might save records, update records, might do varying, all sorts, all manner of things. We've also got this concept of window navigation rules. Now they're kind of key to a unified service desk setup. So the window navigation rules decide when I load this account tab, where do I want to put it? Do I want to load the account record in the current session? Do I want to start a new session? How am I going to make my user interface respond basically to the things that the users are clicking? And there's also a lot more kind of in it, but these are the key kind of concepts when we're building a unified service desk configuration. And all of what I've just described can be no code, but what we can do is add in what we call customization files, where we could add in any custom code that we want and do all manner of other things as well as. So it's important to understand how extensible USD can be. So let's compare that to omni-channel to customer service and kind of start to set a comparison between the two. So omni-channel for customer service, I've described it as the new kid on the block. So it's obviously a newer product, although it's been around for a little while now, I think 12, 18 months kind of thing. So it's getting to be a much more mature product now. So it's starting to be quite a robust kind of product. Unified Service Desk, though, in comparison, has existed for a long time. So there used to be a .NET framework that I think was available on GitHub called CCA. I think it was the Customer Care Accelerator. And that morphed into Unified Service Desk. So Unified Service Desk in varying forms has existed for quite a long time, whereas Omnichannel for Customer Service is a newer product. Omnichannel for customer service, like Unified Service Desk, offers that unified experience to agents. So it does contain a concept of sessions, but as we'll see, the sessions it's a slightly different concept to sessions, and it's purely browser based, whereas Unified Service Desk involves a client install, which we'll see in a minute. Omnichannel for customer service is certainly configurable and extendable, possibly not to the same level as Unified Service Desk, but with every release of it, we get more and more options. And I'm sure Tricia later on is going to show some of those with the way we can do macros and agent scripts and varying other things. One of the key things with Omnichannel is obviously the fact it's got a lot of channels. So it supports currently things like chat, SMS, entity routing. We can look at Facebook and Twitter, and then there's other channels that are becoming available in preview in terms of things like WhatsApp and Teams and many more. And the list seems to get longer and longer every time I look at this. And there's even the ability to have custom channels now where we could, if a channel that you need isn't supported, you could start to build that out yourself. Omnichannel includes a concept of enterprise grade routing. Now, this is something that Unified Service Desk doesn't really have. Now, the idea behind this is whenever chat comes in or an SMS, it doesn't really matter what the interaction is that's incoming. The enterprise grade routing will look at what agents are available, what their capacity is, what their skill set is, what queues they're on, and it will route the chat to the right agents. So it's going down to agent level of getting the right interaction in front of the right agent. Now that's really important in a contact center environment in terms of driving down things like your average handle time and stuff like that, because you want to get those interactions in front of the right agent that can handle with that query as fast as possible. And this enterprise grade routing really gives you the power for that. Now, any functionality around that with Unified Service Desk, you'd have to be bespoken and creating, because it's not a core to the product as such. Now, it does contain agent scripting and macros. It has a different concept to agent scripting to Unified Service Desk, but there are capabilities like that in there. And it's got loads of other features, and I'm not necessarily going to dive into all of them. Although something I will call out is it's really important to keep an eye on Omni-channel, because it's got quite a buoyant roadmap and quite a lot of new features are coming out with each release. So every time you think you understand all the current features on it, go and look again, because you probably don't, because there's new stuff coming out all the time with it. So we've got these two interfaces that we could leverage in our contact center. So what I wanted to try and do as best I can was to give a sense of positioning as to when we might use one or the other, or maybe where we'd combine the two. So first of all, I'm hesitating, and I'll explain why in a minute. Omni-channel for customer service possibly is more suited to your SMEs, your small to medium volume setups, whereas Unified Service Desk may well be more suited to those enterprise environments that have got higher volume, maybe faster paced environments. And Omni-channel out of the box possibly is more suited to slightly simpler business processes. I don't mean necessarily that they are simple, they are simpler, whereas Unified Service Desk might be aimed at kind of highly complex environments that have got real custom business process needs. So for example, I've worked with a bank where we're putting in Unified Service Desk, and they've got a lot of requirements around how we verify who customers are and stuff like that. And we'd have a lot of custom work done in Unified Service Desk to actually meet those needs. Now, the reason I kind of hesitated at the beginning is this is just an opinion, really, and an initial positioning. The lines between these two products as to when you'd use one or the other, I think are becoming increasingly blurred as more and more features go into Omni-channel for customer service. So it's not I'm not necessarily presenting these as hard and fast rules. It's kind of a positioning statement. So it doesn't necessarily mean that Omni-channel can't cope with the volumes that Unified Service Desk can, and it doesn't necessarily mean that Unified Service Desk can't be used in small volume environments either. So the when you use one or the other, and actually I think it's becoming a more difficult choice as we move forward, and as Omni-channel just gets bigger and bigger and includes more and more features. So it's important to understand that Unified Service Desk can consume Omni-channel within it. So if you've set up all these different channels of WhatsApp and Facebook and entity routing and all sorts of other things, you can actually leverage that within Unified Service Desk. So that does give you an option that you could actually try and do the best of both worlds. And as I've mentioned already, important with Omni-channel, watch the roadmap, because as soon as you think that one product is the right one, you might see that the next wave is going to bring you features in Omni-channel, which means maybe you could adopt Omni-channel rather than Unified Service Desk. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what are the key advantages, in my opinion, of the two products. Now, there's loads of detailed advantages. So I'm talking fairly high level here as to what are the key differentiations between the two. So with the Omni-channel for customer service, it's possibly quicker to implement it. So the learning curve for Unified Service Desk to build all the configuration and suggest is actually relatively high, and also projects using it being kind of the enterprise scale, and the fact you're potentially doing all these customizations, it's potentially going to take longer. So I think we'd probably say that generally speaking, projects are going to be quicker to get up and running with Omni-channel for customer service. So if Omni-channel for customer service does meet your needs, maybe that would be the route to consider because of the development times. Now, importantly with Omni-channel for customer service, there's no client install. So the way USD works is we install a client and it caches down all that metadata I've described, all those hosted controls and events of actions, and then it runs on the desktop. Now that does give us some advantages, but it also means we've got to install a client. Now, the kind of challenges I've seen with this are often in contact centers, we'll be working with, say, Citrix on the desktop and things like that. And the admins can face some challenges of getting something like a client-side application installed. So having an application that's purely browser-based in some environments and some architectures might actually be a really big win. So obviously, Omni-channel includes loads of channels, so there's a clue in the name, and they're kind of out the box. They're already baked into the product. You just configure them and use them. Whereas with something like Unified Service Desk, we're looking at either custom or third-party integrations to give us those links into the channels. So that's obviously a key benefit of Omni-channel. And Omni-channel does this enterprise-grade routing. So it's important to understand where both products start in terms of a phone call, for example, coming in, or a web chat, say, might be a better example. So with Unified Service Desk, the experience really starts when the web chat hits the desktop. So the USD application is all about the agent's desktop. Whereas with Omni-channel, it starts a lot sooner. It's about actually presenting the web chat to the customer and also then routing that web chat to the right agent in the first place. So it starts earlier on in the journey of that web chat conversation, if you like. So if you're not using if you're using Omni-channel, then that you're getting that kind of stuff. If you're using just Unified Service Desk, then there are things outside of just the agent's desktop that you're going to have to consider. So what are the advantages of Unified Service Desk? Well, it's potentially got greater extensibility than Omni-channel for customer service because we can build custom hosted controls and we can build whatever we like with code. This is again where it potentially gets blurred. It doesn't mean that Omni-channel for customer service isn't extensible, and I think as time goes on, we'll see more and more extensibility in Omni-channel. So yeah, there's grayness there. When we talk about Unified Service Desk being a client-side application, that possibly gives us more scope for integration in with line of business applications. So where you've got potentially some really old legacy line of business applications that you need a very custom approach to integrate with, then that might be one of the big gains of Unified Service Desk over, say, Omni-channel, which in some enterprises may well be really significant, but it depends on what applications you're actually using and how much benefit that actually is. I've put potentially lower license costs. So Unified Service Desk comes with, you get a license to use Unified Service Desk if you've got one of the enterprise app licenses. So if you've got a sales app or you've got a customer service app license. Whereas with Omni-channel, you're going to have to pay for the channels that you're going to interact with. So there'll be an additional license fee for Omni-channel. But if we're talking about costs to give the kind of bigger picture, if in your scenario you could implement Omni-channel quicker than Unified Service Desk, any savings on licenses of using Unified Service Desk might get eaten up by the development costs. So it's kind of it's not as simple as just looking at the license costs, obviously. Now, importantly, Unified Service Desk can use Omni-channel. Now, this also gives us abilities where you might have contact centers that have already adopted Unified Service Desk and want to start leveraging Omni-channel capabilities for all the different channels like WhatsApp and Facebook and Twitter and everything. So you could actually bring Omni-channel into Unified Service Desk and kind of get the best of both worlds. I mentioned that I've got an accelerator for Unified Service Desk, and that's what we're going to see in the demo. Now, this accelerator is available for free download, so you can just have a go and just use it for demos if you like, and have a play around with it. It does support now Omni-channel, so you can configure it to work with Omni-channel, and that's what we're going to see. So that's where you could experiment with the usage of both of these products at the same time. So I'm going to be brave and I'm going to dive into live demonstration time. I'm going to focus more on Unified Service Desk than maybe Omni-channel, and that's simply because if you stay for the session that Trisha's got later on, you're going to see more of the Omni-channel later with her presentation. So try and get into a live demo. So first of all, I just wanted to show you the concept of how you administer Unified Service Desk. So you just get a flavor. So what I've got loaded here is the Unified Service Desk Administrator app. And when you install USD, basically you'll get an app that gives you this. So I mentioned that hosted controls are the key kind of object. So I've got a hosted control here, for example, which is my account tab. And if I open that, we can just see that basically all it is running a unified interface page in Chrome. So we're going to get a tab that essentially is a Chrome browser, but it's going to be rendered as a tab within USD. Now, for each one of the objects I create, I get a number of events. So just to give you a flavor of some of the events, I've got things like page ready, which is when the page is actually loaded, or maybe it's closing, when the record within it's saved and things like that, or the page is refreshed. So if I look at, say, my page ready, this event runs when my account tab loads. And then what I've got is a number of actions that I've decided are going to run when this page loads. So if we look at this one, for example, this action is going to run, and all this action does is it checks to see whether the customer is on credit hold or not, and would put a pop-up up saying, warning the agent that they're looking at an account that's on credit stop. So you can build these kind of things with, as you can see, low code or no code. Now, obviously, there's loads of different actions in there to learn about and loads of different events and stuff, but that's the general kind of construct that you've got. We've then got this idea of window navigation rules. Now, all these do is decide what gets loaded when and how. So if I focus in on my account entity still, so I'll just filter this and say, well, I only want to see the navigation rules for the account entity, just so we can see the wood for the trees. All we're saying with these rules, so if I've got a search box, for example, so I've got a hosted control that says search. If I try and load the account as something that's got the account, an account entity in it, so I'm navigating to an account from the search page, what it's going to do is create me a session and load whatever the account is into an account tab. But then there are other combinations where I don't want to create a session. What I want to do is load a tab in an existing session. So much as these look complicated, it's quite simple to define when this happens, where do I want this record to go. Now, we're looking at a really big Unified Service Desk config here, and this is my accelerator that I explained you can download. And just to kind of give you a flavor for why I call it an accelerator, what we've got is this idea of options, and you can see there's loads of yes, no options. So user count is set to yes. All that is saying is I want to use the account entity in the interface. If I then change that option to N, so no, then the account entity would just disappear from my interface. So I've got most of the things set as yes, so I've got loads and loads of options. So typically what you do is you go through here and go, well, I don't use accounts, I only use contacts. I want to use cases, but I don't need leads or opportunities. And you just turn off and on different features that you want to light up in the interface. And that's what we're going to see in a minute. So that's the flavor of how we configure a Unified Service Desk interface. I'll just show you at a high level what we'd have with Omni-channel, so you get a flavor for the difference. So this is Omni-channel. So when I install Omni-channel, I get an Omni-channel administration. So not too dissimilar concept to Unified Service Desk. We get all the different channels here. So I've defined my chat channel here, and we create a record that says this is the chat and how I want it to behave. And then what we get is the different queues that we've got. So and each queue would have users on it, and then we'll get things like work streams that would define how we'll route to those and stuff. Now, I'm not going to go into the detail of those because I'm going to assume that Trisha's going to do that, but hopefully you can see that Omni-channel, like Unified Service Desk, has got this admin app, but it's probably a little bit more straightforward to kind of set up, or at least to set up initially to just get you up and running. I'm sure it gets a lot more complicated if you want to start building loads of macros and agent scripts and stuff, and you could go to town with this. But the initial setup, I think we could argue quite clearly that it's going to be faster with Omni-channel and easier. So let's move on to having a quick look at Unified Service Desk actually running. Can somebody tell me if you can still see my screen, because my screen seems to have hung.
Yes, Neil, we can see the screen.
Yeah, you can see my screen, but it's hung on me. Okay, let's see if, okay, it's just the bar at the bottom seems to have stopped working, but I'm still working, hopefully. So fingers crossed this is going to carry on working. So this is Unified Service Desk. So this is actually an application that's been loaded from the client, and it's cached down everything. Now, to give you a kind of a summary of what's in here, this main panel here, well, that's just a browser that's got a dashboard in it. And you can see I've put a panel up on the right here. And as a user, I can shrink these panels and expand them. Now, this panel here has got a Canvas app in it, and I'm using this Canvas app to serve up announcements to the agents. So maybe there's global announcements. So we've got one here about an upcoming user group that I'm going to be involved in, and we could bring up, say, the web page that explains that event. Now, these could be announcements. Maybe you've got a system outage coming up, or maybe there's a special offer or something. So it's just a way of getting announcements to users. Now, what I'm showing here is already we're seeing that Unified Service Desk is using Canvas apps on their own, model-driven apps, and I'm going to websites and stuff. So this is the kind of nature of it, that we can show data from lots of different places. Now, I'll just show you the concept of a session to start with. If I go into contacts here, I could search for a contact. Now, you can see I've got these telephony controls at the top. I'm not set up ready to make an inbound phone call right now, but if a phone call came in, then the contact record would pop automatically based on the incoming phone number and things like that. So, but I'm just going to open a contact manually. So I'm going to open Bruce Wayne. There's always a theme to my test data. It's always superheroes. So if you think about the flow of a typical conversation in a contact center, it's hello, Bruce, what's your name, what's your date of birth, or whatever, to confirm who you are. So that's the idea of this Canvas app here. So the agent can confirm that Bruce has confirmed these details and submit that. And then we move forward and we've got an agent script. Also notice that because I've opened a contact record, that contact record is linked to an account, and it's automatically brought me the account record up at the same time, because in my window navigation rules, I defined that I wanted to do that. We've then got an agent script over here that lets us do varying things. So just to show you one example, I'd create a case, for example, and you can see that's loaded with the case tab. And I'll just save that. So got the record. Now you can see what happened as soon as I've loaded the case, this agent script's moved forwards. So now here are the things that I could do as an agent while I'm working on this case. So I could do things like confirming I'd sent the first response. I could search for a solution. I could send an email to the customer about this case and so on and so forth. And obviously you could tailor what comes up in this agent script. I've also shown up here, I've not got my KPIs set up, my SLA set up, but you could see details of the SLA up here and stuff like that as well. You can set all that kind of thing. So I hope you're kind of getting the flavour that I can, with Unified Service Desk and its config, put a whole load of automation on top of the standard entities that are already there in Dynamics 365. Now let's, what I'm going to do, so I'm going to leave that session open, and if I go back here, you can see I've got Omni-channel here, so that we've now swapped into Omni-channel, but I'm still within Unified Service Desk. So this is the typical dashboard that an agent would get within Omni-channel as web chats come in, for example, or any other interactions. They start to pop up on here, and the agent can start to interact with them. So I think I've got, I'm struggling with my tabs not working. What I've got here is a standard customer service portal, and all I've done is gone into Omni-channel, I've defined the chat channel, and I've pasted one code snippet into this, and it's enabled chat on this portal, so it says let's chat. Now I've done very little setup on this, so you could have had pre-chat surveys and all sorts of other things. So we've had a chat come in. So I'm being the agent and and the customer at the same time. So the agent sees that the chat's come in and they would accept the chat. Now, as we're in Unified Service Desk, what's going to happen is a session's going to start. So this is showing you the concept that I've got the original session open where I was working on this case, but a web chat's come in and I'm now working on this web chat at the same time, and I could reply back to that customer. Now, obviously, I'm not going to bother demonstrating web chat to you. I think we all know that we can chat backwards and forwards and stuff like that, but it's quite a nice chat interface. When you do these chats, what we get is a conversation, and that's effectively the activity that links with the chat. And if I go to this search here, I might say, well, let's just imagine I've identified who I'm talking to. If I open the contact record or created a new contact record, automations that I've got set up in Unified Service Desk, if I go back to this chat, has automatically linked that to that customer that I'm now talking to. And if I created a case, it would link that chat conversation to that case as well. So what I'm getting here is the kind of automations that I can do with Unified Service Desk with agent scripts and things, but I've also got the chat happening. Now, at some point, actually, I'm not going to delve too much into the actual the way the chat within Omni-channel works, because I want to move on to looking at some other things. But hopefully you can get the idea that you can chat backwards and forwards, and that's kind of just baked in. And what we're looking at is that working within sessions within Unified Service Desk. So I'm just going to, what I want to do is I want to end this chat and close these sessions down. So I just want to come out of Unified Service Desk now. So I just want to give you a quick kind of demonstration of Omni-channel, so you get the context as to how the UIs, how the interfaces kind of behave slightly differently. So if I go back to my browser, I've got my chat. Let me shut that down. What I want to load here, rather than the Omni-channel administration, if I load Omni-channel for customer service. So this is the kind of interface that the agent and or supervisor would get. So I'm actually a supervisor here, so I get two tabs here. One is a summary of current conversations. Well, there aren't any because I haven't got any conversations going on, but that would give me a list of all the current conversations that are happening. And then here is what the agent would see, and it's very, well, it's not very like, it is exactly the same as what we saw in Unified Service Desk. Notice I've got this presence control up here, and I've made that default to do not disturb when I first go in. So I'm going to say I'm available for chat. Actually, rather than chat, what I'm going to do is do something slightly different. So in Omni-channel, we can, because we've already seen chat, rather than just showing you the same thing again. In Omni-channel, we can have multiple different types of interactions. So as an agent, we might be what we call a blended agent, and you might answer an email 1 minute, then a web chat, then a phone call, and then maybe somebody raises a case on a portal or something, and that arrives, and we still want to route that to somebody. So that's the concept of entity routing, where it's actually data that we're routing to the agent. And quite commonly, that's going to be cases or work orders, for example. So I'm just to show you the idea of entity routing, I'm going to quickly create a case. So I'm just going to go into the Customer Service Hub to do this. And it doesn't really matter who this is, but let's stick with the superhero theme. Now, the way I've got this set up is to say, well, if anybody creates and routes a high priority case, I want that to go straight to my agents. But other priority cases maybe just drop on a normal Dynamics queue and are dealt with in the fullness of time. But if somebody says this is high priority, I want that to ping in front of an agent as soon as possible. So I'm going to create that case, save it. And if I go back to the dashboard, fingers crossed, I only set this up earlier on today. What we should see is the case will arrive to the agent. Oh, sorry, user error. I have to click the root button. I've actually got to do it. So now what we should see, yeah, a new work item's been assigned to me because I'm available and I've got the right skills to handle that. I should have clicked that to open it, but I was a bit slow, but I didn't. But it's now in my list of things to do, and I could open that if I want to. So I could have a whole list and open them as and when I need to. So what this has just done is opened me a case within a session, but it's put the sessions down the side here with Omni-channel. Now, if I wanted to, for example, open this customer record, it hasn't opened automatically for me, but if I press Control and click, then that's going to open me a new tab within the current session. And if I wanted to then open the primary contact, for example, again, Control and click, and I'd open this. Now, it is possible to do an alternative. If I press Shift and click as a user, what that's going to do is start me a new session with that record in it. So by using Control click or Shift click, I can decide as a user, do I want to load something into the current session or into a new session? So I've now ended up with, here's the case and here's the account. And I actually really quite like this interface because you very, very quickly as a user get used to clicking Control click and Shift click and loading stuff like this. So there is a lot of merit in the way this interface works. So I'm hoping I've managed to give you a kind of a bit of a flavour of both of them. We've had a look at the entity routing. Now, there's obviously a lot more we could have done in Unified Service Desk. And if we just go back and look at the amount of the config in here, I mean, this is a pretty big config, so I've got literally hundreds of objects and stuff that I could have, and loads of action calls, literally thousands of them. So you can extend Unified Service Desk significantly. I've even got, if you look at the customization files, I've got particular code in here. So this is the CTI connector that I'd got, where I'd got the telephony controls at the top, for example. So that's code that's come in from a third party, which in this case is QGate. So I'm hoping I'm trying to explain the difference between the two, and you'll start to get a sense that Unified Service Desk is potentially more complicated, but also potentially more flexible than Omni-channel. But Omni-channel is getting more and more flexible and more powerful the longer it is in existence. So it's kind of, it can only be a good thing for us, really, because we can use both together, and it's just giving us more and more choices in terms of what we can do with interfaces. So I've deliberately tried to leave a bit of time at the end, and I'm quite happy to dive in and do random demos of anything else if there's anything else people want to see. But I thought it'd be really good to do some questions. So I'm quite happy to, if you want to put some questions into the chat, that's great, and Raz can read them out, I guess, or I'll have a look at the chat. Or failing that, you know, unmute your mic. I'm quite happy to take questions live as well as.
Okay, so the first question is from Angus. So Angus is asking, keep both products?
Yeah, will they keep both, or will they be deprecated? So this is only opinion as opposed to fact. Yeah, what Microsoft will do in the fullness of time will be Microsoft's decision when they get there. I think there must be a point where we end up with one product because everything that Unified Service Desk can do could ultimately end up in Omni-channel or another product. So I think it would be naive to say that any product would exist forever, because that's just not real. But if we look at the level of extensibility and configurability with Unified Service Desk, I don't expect it to be going away particularly quickly, because I think there's still going to be those really big enterprise level installations where Unified Service Desk will be applicable. But I think over time what we'll see is more and more go the omni-channel route, but there's still necessarily a place for Unified Service Desk, certainly for the foreseeable future. But I'd be foolish to say that that would be a forever state, you know, because things change. Does that answer the question, Angus?
Yes. So, yeah, great stuff, Angus. Yep. So, yeah, I mean, look, it's changing times, products are evolving, and it's a very valid question. The same applies for PSA as well, and other products out there. So now there's a question by Harold Simon, who's asking about if you could make a statement regarding a comparison with the solutions and Solgari products.
Yeah, well, I've not used the Solgari hands-on, but I have seen a few demos and talked to their guys a few times. So Solgari uses the channel integration framework. Now, I believe, and if anybody's on from Solgari, they could confirm this, I believe that their product is either does or is going to support the version 2 of the channel integration framework. And that would make it potential that you could have it as a custom channel within Omni-channel. So you can use Solgari in its own right, just with dynamics, and in a lot of instances that's probably fine. That probably meets your needs. But if you've got these requirements for session management and stuff, then the advantage would be to use Solgari with Omni-channel or with Omni-channel and Unified Service Desk. So again, it's not necessarily an either or. And I think Solgari and potentially other products may well bring some custom channels to us that maybe they do telephony particularly well, for example, and we want to adopt that and bring that in, and or maybe they have a web chat solution that for whatever reason we deem to be better than the Microsoft offering, or whatever channel. So
hello.
it's perfectly possible to bring Solgari into that kind of environment.
So Harold, I hope that answers your question. So just for those who don't know, the Solgari solution is built using the channel integration framework. And I believe they've designed for it to work as a omni-channel first product. So
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to see where that goes. The next question from Evangelis is regarding. First of all, he thanks Neil, and would like you to quantify the comparison between omni-channel and USD for mid to large volume call center scenarios.
I don't really want to unmute and explain what do you mean by quantify it between medium and large. What is it you're asking? Do you want to unmute and maybe give us a bit more detail?
Hi.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. Good morning, first of all. The question, you did a comparison and you said that the USD is much better on large volumes.
Yeah.
I would like you to clarify what you mean large and medium there.
Oh, what, how big you mean? So it's very difficult to be very specific. So you might look at it in terms of, say, agents. So maybe if you've got a contact center of, say, 50 agents, which actually would be a fair sized contact center, maybe you'd view something like the Omni-channel product that you can get up and running with really quickly to be your first kind of thought process. Whereas if you'd got a product like you got a contact center maybe with thousands of people, maybe spread across multiple countries, maybe dealing with lots of different lines of business, then the scale of that might lead you more towards unified service desk. But I guess the kind of caveat is we're going to see those lines blurred more and more as time moves on. So it's hard to give you exact numbers or a definite feel. The devil will be in the detail in terms of what functional requirements go behind that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. I just wanted a rough, understanding of what you mean by medium large.
Yeah, and this is an opinion rather than necessarily a fact, because I'm sure we'll see very large installations using Omni-channel, and we'll see some fairly small ones using unified service desk. So I'm not presenting it as a hard and fast kind of rule. It's more of a way of trying to convey where I think the obvious sweet spot is for both products, if that's a way of describing it.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Cheers.
So now's a great opportunity to ask any other questions, maybe not just related towards Unified Service Desk or Omni-channel, but any other questions you may have. Feel free to use the floor for any other questions. Again, so today's sessions have been touching on many of these topics. We are looking to do a lot more deeper dives into different products and different solutions and implementation approaches, but we want your feedback. We want to know what types of questions or scenarios are you facing. Is it challenges with telephone integration? Is it challenges with different types of omni-channel experiences? We want to know, is it things to do with security and compliance requirements? All these things we want to know. We want to know better from your challenges, what you're facing on the ground with your existing clients and with your personal approach to delivering industry solutions. So please feel free to ask your questions, ask away. And the next session obviously will begin in just over 6 minutes now. It'll be Artur who will be delivering the session on chatbots. So Artur is just complimenting your office setup, Neil. Great stuff, Otto. So yes, again, please, we want your feedback. We want to know what other things are you pondering on when it comes to the challenges faced when you're in call center environments, when you are delivering in help desk scenarios. What you've seen from Neil today is that one of the challenges faced in the call center is the UI limitations that the Unified Service Desk helps you to overcome, and allows call centers to work with multiple panes and manage to route their calls in a more effective way for call centers visually, based on their workflows. So that's the primary advantage that you have there. And as he mentioned, the comparison with Omni-channel, it's basically evolving with the unified interface. So yes, it looks as though no one has any further questions related for Neil. Neil, look, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for your sessions. We're all big fans of yours, so we're all reading your blogs, and so we want to thank you for that. And do you have any final words for the community as to what they should be doing or keeping an eye on when it comes to, you're known as being the guy for call center implementations.
Yeah.
Is there anything that they should be aware of?
So I think with call centers, we're still grappling with things like omni-channel integration and a number of channels and stuff. But the thing to have an eye on is kind of what's coming next, and it's looking much more at how we use artificial intelligence and things like bots and smart assistants to get more intelligent with how we provide this service, and to be able to do more kind of unattended service, if you like, where maybe a bot can start to handle what previously an agent had done and only hand off to an agent when the bot runs out of steam. And also looking at how we can use smart assistants, virtual agents, bots within the contact center to guide the actions the agent's going to take. So they're not necessarily always customer facing things. It might be using some kind of machine learning based bot or something to provide the agent with details about what the next best action is with this customer and things like that, or maybe to give them a kind of guided way of resolving a customer's problem and stuff. So it's looking for those kind of clever things that can take it to that next level and ultimately give better customer service with less people, so less cost.
Well, there you go. You've heard it from Neil himself. So self-service, guided self-service is the future. So that's what everyone should be aiming to do. And in reducing a lot of wasted time spent on calls, which could easily be triaged more effectively. And that's where these virtual assisted agents and chatbots really play a really important role. So thanks, Neil, for sharing that insight into the futures of call centers.
Cheers.
And for those who aren't already following Neil on Twitter, LinkedIn, as well as following his blog, please do so. Yes, without further ado, I will now get introduced Otto. So thanks again,
Cheers.
Neil.
Thank you very much.